Call the meeting to order. We'd like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion, and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
With, oh, I think that's it, right?
Mrs. Jung.
Oh,
Mr.
yep.
Ryan, and Mrs.
Mrs.
Witt.
Witt.
are absent.
Yes, so with 4 members present, we have a quorum. Mr. Carey may be coming later, we will see. So we will move on to, if anyone wants to move something from consent to new business? No? See none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. We will move on to board and superintendent salutes.
Don't have any this evening, but thank you.
Okay. And any public comments? Nope. All right. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes the following action items: approval of accounts payable and payroll, July 2019, approval of treasurer's report, June 2019, approval of minutes from June 24th, 2019, regular meeting, approval of resignations of employment of staff, and that one was as amended, approval of destruction of audio recordings from December 2017, approval of post-insurance bond compliance report, and the following informational items: the employee position report, the Freedom of Information Act request report, field trip notification. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Would you like to make an introduction?
Yes, as part of the consent agenda that you just approved, we've now officially have a principal back at McDowell Elementary School. And it's Mr. Jake Countryman, who's a longtime District 302 employee. So I'd like to introduce Jake and let him take a minute to introduce his family, his other family. The Kaneland family to his other family.
So I brought my wife Carrie, my kids Callie and Tristan here, and just want to thank you very much for the opportunity. I've grown up as an educator in Kaneland, did my student teaching here, and so it's really cool to get all the way through and become part of a great leadership team here. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We're equally excited to have Jake, and he'll do an awesome job, carry on an awesome job from the prior principal, who's right behind him, and carry on that fine tradition. So welcome, and good to see you again, and nice to meet your family.
Thanks for coming.
Next, we'll transition to new business. If you recall, a couple months ago, Dr. Fuchs shared with our guests a presentation on solar energy, and the board asked for an update, or several updates along the way, and so we do have formally an update tonight. No action is going to be expected, but we do have an update, and so I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs and let her take over.
Very good, and I have Erin Rafferty from Train and Mark Payton, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and I'm actually going to turn the presentation over to them for tonight's update. And there'll be time for questions once they get through the information. I want to, remind Erin, please, to be sure to speak into the mic. Yeah. Yep, you can raise it. Yep, there you go. Patrick, thank you. That one's on too if you want to turn it on. I don't know if we need to or not. Awesome, it's just blank. Should be good. There you go. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Raise it a little more. Okay. So, like you said, we're not looking for any vote tonight or any decisions. We're just going to provide you with an update of kind of what we've been up to for the last few months and some recommendations that we've come up with. So, Mark, if you want to move to the next slide. So, we've worked closely with Mark over the last few months in, surveying the sites, right, determining suitability for panel locations. We've designed some systems that we're going to review quickly tonight so you can see what they look like. If you remember from the last time, the state incentive program requires that we secure ComEd interconnection approval before we can even apply for the incentives, which is a pretty lengthy process. And we've submitted applications for all of your schools. So far, actually there's an update since the slide was put together, but so far we have approved Harder Middle School, McDowell Elementary, and John Shields Elementary. We're expecting to get approved over the next couple weeks. I'm sorry, it's Blackberry. The ones that are approved are Harder Middle School, Blackberry Creek, and John Shields. We're expecting to get approved over the next couple weeks, McDowell and John Stewart. The high school, as we'll see, is a very large system that we've designed, and because of that, it requires a more extensive analysis for ComEd, and so that could literally be two months out or so. Once we get the interconnection approvals in place, the next step would then be to submit the incentive applications to the state, and that will include a non-refundable application fee. The state program really doesn't want us submitting incentive applications into the program unless the projects are going to move forward ultimately. So before we submit into the program, that we'll be asking for a decision by the board on whether or not you'd want to move forward. And I have just one more note at the bottom here. If you remember, there's kind of a limitation on the available budget or solar capacity. And one really nice thing about the program is they update on a nightly basis of what the budget is. And right now it's right around 20 megawatts, which we're going for about 15% of that potentially through your program. So we can move on to the next slide. So here's Harder Middle School. We have a rooftop system designed for this school. It would provide about 50% of the annual energy needs of this building. This is a flat roof, so this would be a ballasted system, meaning it'd be anchored entirely by weight. We wouldn't be penetrating the roof in any way. Go on to the next one. John Shields Elementary is also a rooftop system. This one will provide 90% of your annual energy needs for the building. And this is actually a metal roof that has seams that stick up, and so and this is not a flat roof. This is a tilted roof, and so we would actually be attaching to the seams themselves. So again, there'd be no piercing of the roof, the rooftop itself, which is good. When we see those types of roofs, then we get excited about it. Go to the next one. So John Stewart, no surprise, is a exact copy of John Shields. So we have the same thing proposed here, slightly less offset just because you use a little bit more energy at this school than you do at John Shields, but otherwise it's the exact same design recommendation. So this is the big one. So for the high school, we're going for it all. We've got a 1.5 megawatt ground mount system proposed or recommended. This would provide over 80% of the high school's annual electricity usage, which is substantial. Clearly, this is your largest energy user in your portfolio. The reason for not going with roof mount is because you have kind of a hodgepodge of different roof conditions out there that would make it cost prohibitive to do it, and you have a lot of land space out there, right? So this one, because, like I said earlier, because of the size of this is going to take ComEd a little bit longer to approve it, and sometimes they approve it with contingencies that they may need to upgrade distribution system infrastructure in the area in order to accommodate a system of this size. So I can't say today what the outcome of that analysis is going to be, but we're going for it. If we go to the next, so the next two, so for McDowell Elementary and as we'll see for Blackberry as well, similar situation. Your existing roof conditions can't support. We wouldn't recommend putting solar on them over a 20 to 30 year period, and there's no real reason to replace the roof right now. There's no need. So we're also recommending ground mount at both of these two locations, and as you can see, the annual offset in this case is 100%. So this would be fully, the energy needed at the site will be fully produced there on site. There are a couple for there are a couple potential complications with McDowell and Blackberry in that they're situated within residential neighborhoods. There's no issue there associated with safety or anything like that, but it's just sometimes community members might not want to be able to see solar panels out of their backyard. So this is where if you wanted to put solar at McDowell Elementary, this is where we'd recommend you put it, right? But there's some additional things to potentially be considered and work through there. Nobody will probably argue with putting solar on your roofs, or I would imagine not out at high school either, but in some of these residential neighborhoods that could, something to take into consideration. And Blackberry's the same thing. So we've got a ground mount system proposed out there, and again, it will produce 100% of the building's annual energy needs. So just provided two slides here that just give you examples of what this might look like aesthetically, because there's not a whole lot of solar in Illinois right now, and so sometimes people want to know what this might look like. For the rooftops, I mean, Harder Middle School, you won't even be able to see the panels, so I included pictures that are more applicable for John Shields and John Stewart, right? And this is about what it would look like. I think it looks beautiful. But most people don't object, but that gives you an idea. The next one is a couple of ground mount examples, and on the left you'll see. So these are kind of the two common design options. Where on the left you've got gravel. A lot of times people will put down gravel. On the right you have turf. Here in the Midwest, actually, is a third option that native plantings, like pollinator-friendly plantings. But this gives you an idea of what it might look like. Okay, so this slide is actually very similar to a slide that I presented back in April. But back in April it was more kind of general idea of a power purchase agreement, and now that we've done the analysis, we're now able to actually present the financial impact of the program. So we have a little under 3.4 megawatts of solar systems that we would be installing at no cost to the district, right? In turn, the district would agree to buy the power that the system produces at a reduced energy rate compared to what you're paying now, and in theory, what you should be able to get from the utility, from the grid provided energy. In order to offer that reduced rate, we will be capturing the incentives, right? So there's federal tax credits that we can monetize as a private entity that otherwise wouldn't be available to you. There's these new state incentives that we'd be capturing, and then there's also a ComEd rebate that we'd be capturing as well. The energy rate we come up with is 4.8 cents per kWh for the first year, and then there would be a 1% annual escalation over a 25-year period. So if you look at what you're paying right now for grid-provided energy, it's a little over 6.9 cents per kWh. And if you multiply out over the 25-year term, even with that 1% escalation, you're still significantly below. In year 25, you're still significantly below where you are today in terms of the power you're providing. You're at about 5.8 cents at year 25. Another key, so that rate includes all program-related costs, including operations and maintenance of the systems, including things like we've got scheduled inverter replacements planned during the 25-year term. So Train takes care of all of that. Ultimately, we didn't quite. I was aiming for the 80% mark, but we didn't quite get there. We're providing with 79% of your 80% is the goal for how much we need to decarbonize by 2030 in order to meet the climate conditions. So I was really aiming for 80, but we didn't quite get you there. Might have to change a couple light bulbs or something to get that extra percent. And if you look at the 25-year term, your total net savings is a little over $5 million for the program. Okay. So there's two aspects of this that are somewhat time sensitive. There's the federal tax credits, and then there's the state incentives. So the federal tax credits are going to be around for the next 4 years, but they're stepping down in 4% increments. But we only, I don't get too into the weeds, but we only need to realize 5% of the costs in order to qualify for this year's tax rate. Okay, so right now, we've assumed that we can get 2019 federal tax credits. And then the other thing is the state incentives, like you said, it's competitive. It's a first come, first served program, and there's no saying when the additional 20 megawatts will be used up. So because you have kind of, Kaneland High School, it's probably going to take a little while. We don't really know about McDowell and Blackberry, depending on how you want to proceed with those communities, right? But we would not recommend letting these first three listed on this slide, having those wait for these other sites to be finalized, right? So potentially looking at submitting the program in batches to the state, with batch one being the roof mount systems, and I mean, batch two or batch three, those could get swiped, right? Just submitting them as they're ready to go, right? Is the idea. Go to the next slide, Mark. So in terms of what we're recommending for some next steps in the program development, one is to have your attorney review the power purchase agreement terms. I mean, I have one slide there that had some key terms, but this is a 60-page document and a 25-year agreement, right? So getting the ball rolling on having your attorney review the terms, working with our attorney, will be recommended. Recommend submitting the batch one incentives as soon as we get those interconnection applications approved, which, so we now have 2 of the 3 approved, so we're really expecting John Stewart to come through. I was hoping it would come through today, right? But any day now, John Stewart should come through. Upper limit of 3 weeks because ComEd technically needs to get it back to us within 3 weeks based on state statute for timing. If you do want to pursue Blackberry Creek and or McDowell, we recommend potentially engaging with those homeowners associations, seeing how they may love it, right? I personally would love it if my local school district wanted to put something in my neighborhood, but that's not, again, I'm biased, so. And then, obviously, Train will continue to work with ComEd on interconnection for the high school. There's already been a decent amount of back and forth there, and we're expecting there to continue to be. And then I meant to change that word to batch. I'm going to as tranche, but submit the additional batches basically as they're ready to go, assuming there's still available budget. If there's no additional state budget, then obviously we won't be submitting those batches. And that's the end of the update. So happy to take questions if there's questions.
Before you ask questions, let me just give a quick update. I've reached out to the village of Sugar Grove, Elburn, and Montgomery at this point. I've had a good conversation with Sugar Grove. For Harder and Shields, it doesn't sound like that will be any kind of problem because they are roof mounted. Our permitting, of course, will come through the ROE, the Regional Office of Education, but we do like to engage the villages so that we're working together and they're not surprised by any projects that we might be doing. With regard to the village of Montgomery, I got a hold of them. They want to have further conversations specifically because it's not roof mounted. So we're going to be setting up a meeting with them in terms of location and size and just walking them through that. They do have municipal ordinances that govern solar energy. So we still will get our permitting from the ROE, but we'll be working alongside the village. And with regard to Elburn, I haven't been able to make contact with them yet, but I'm hoping to get them done this week sometime. So, now questions.
Are you going after Jeff? Is that who you're trying to get a hold of?
Nievenhoven?
No.
Walter?
Or Mayor?
No, we'll start with Jeff Nievenhoven
Okay.
first.
Okay.
Or, what's
Yes, I
his,
think
it's
that's
Jeff,
what it
right?
is.
Yeah. No,
No.
Nievenhoven, what's it?
I knows the name, but I
Yeah.
don't remember the person.
Yeah, we'll start with him and then
Okay.
if we need to work up with Jeff, we
All
can.
right. Holler if you
So-
get some help.
But anyway, they've got the one on the roof at Stewart and one on the ground at Blackberry. So I'm
Right.
hopeful that the roof one and batch one will be similar to Sugar Grove, where it's
Considering
not
the
such a
schools.
big deal.
Yeah, consider the schools are the same, basically, right?
Right, right. But Blackberry will have to make sure that we're working together with them.
Okay.
So, again, there's no action from the board tonight, but we're having the conversations. Additionally, I have sent the power purchase agreement to Maureen. As Erin mentioned, it is very lengthy, and she hasn't gotten it back to us yet with comments. So once we get that back, we'll go back and forth with Train to work with that. So that way we'll be prepared for when we get that last sign off on ComEd, right?
Yep.
So. Yep, go ahead.
Ready?
Yep,
Awesome. Hi.
thank you.
Conflicting, harder, not tied in, right? Not to the top of the roof, you just wait.
Right,
I heard-
yep.
I think you said that it's gonna be tied, but anyway, just clarification.
Yep.
Weight,
Mhm.
does it take a certain amount of wind, all that type of thing?
Yeah,
How's
so-
that preventable from toppling over or what have you?
Yeah, so there'll be permitting requirements, right, in regards to the wind load. And there'll be a detailed structural analysis that'll be required as part of the sort of the next steps, right, the early steps associated with implementation. Permitting in general is stated as a condition and condition precedent in the power purchase agreement. So there's certain things that if for whatever reason we're unable, like with permitting, we're unable to get through, then basically district walks away. We basically don't move forward with that aspect of the power purchase agreement. So there's our engineers don't have any concerns associated with Harder Middle School and associated with the preliminary load calcs, but that'll be something that'll need to be looked at in much more detail during the early engineering stages of the actual contract execution. Yeah.
I got a lot of questions, so I
Sure,
don't
go
want
ahead.
everybody
Yeah,
else,
go ahead.
if you got any other questions.
I do, but-
I'll go back and forth.
Okay.
That's fine.
When it comes to the ground units, you said there's no safety issues. Are there security issues?
Well, so I meant there's no safety issues just associated with being in the proximity of solar panels,
Okay.
right? That's a question that sometimes comes up in public forums. But clearly, this is high voltage power, right? So for all ground mount deployments in Illinois, regardless of where it is, there's requirements regarding fencing
Okay.
and regarding the locking of any gates that are installed. But that's about it. So there's no additional security mandates associated with it.
In your experience, is that enough?
I mean, you will hear about some like vandalism like type things. I am not familiar with a solar field related injury or death or anything of that nature. I haven't done an exhaustive search of that, but I literally have never ever heard of that. So, but yeah, the fencing and a locked gate is essentially what the state requirements are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And cost for the fencing is built into the per kilowatt price that we talked about in the power purchase agreement. So it's not something additional that Kaneland needs to pay for.
Yep. Yep.
When and if everything goes well,
Yep.
and we move forward, do we accept your design or where you want to put them? I'm sure you guys have gone extensively through this. And my concern is, in the high school, the property that you're considering.
Okay.
And again, I'm sure you guys talked about it. Uniquely, it's right by the parking lot, it's right in front of everything, and I believe that's where the band practices. Right? Right in front of the auditorium?
The band practice field is kind of next to the fire science.
They moved it?
Yeah, it's been back there for a couple of years now.
Since my son graduated.
Yep.
So again, so where it is potentially looked to be at, it's right in the front. I mean, so which the fencing, the potential vandalism, the kids, at the end of the day. So I just feel that it's too close to the school. But that's what I'm saying, if and when we move forward, is that designated exactly where it's gonna be?
I mean, at this point, we haven't talked about putting it anywhere else. The further away from the school you get, well, obviously, there's a visibility issue where when it's hidden, you can't kind of see what's going on, you know, where when it's right out there in front, you can kind of keep tabs on it a little better. And second, it does impact the cost. The further away you go, the more expensive the system becomes because of the getting the cabling and, trenching and whatnot. So, so we try and keep it as close to the building as we can.
So I assume hence I don't see the middle school, the old middle school in here.
Correct.
Because they got a lot of land out there, so.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, understood.
Is that one section, right, as I'm looking at it too, just to the east of that, that's an area that kind of has a tendency to flood a lot?
Well, there's a detention pond over there, yeah.
Right.
I mean, and a little bit over the pipeline,
Yeah.
which is just to the east of where the proposed
Okay,
location
so
is.
the pipeline is to the east of that.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
I'm sure you coordinate how long the years are with roof repairs that we need to make. Who is responsible to remove those panels if you need to do something with the roof? Who's paying for that?
Well, the roof mount systems were all done in areas that we don't expect there to be any roof replacements in the 25 years.
But if there is, whose
But if
cost
there
is it?
is.
Whose cost is
Well,
it?
that would probably be our cost at that point,
It would be.
yeah.
Okay, I'd like to protect ourselves, at least 50/50 on that, because why should we pay for something that you're having a lot of gain in?
Well, so I might have misunderstood the question, but I think the way I understood the question was if you have to do roof maintenance to your roof unrelated to our system.
Yeah, you're in the way.
Right, got it. Yeah, under that scenario, we would not be liable for those costs. But again, that is a big part of the motivation for why we've recommended, where we've recommended to put the panels, right? Based on the expectation that you won't need to do maintenance or repair on those roofs.
Okay.
And why we have not recommended to do panels in other parts of your portfolio.
All right, so I'm concerned with that. Just what was it, several years ago, we had to do major repairs on this school itself because of the winds.
Well, that was actually, initially, it was hail damage.
Repairs, either way. So I'm concerned with that. Or I'd like to express my concern with that.
You know, that's something I could reach out to. For example, the last 2 times we had to do roof repairs here, it was both covered by insurance.
But they're gonna
could-
scream and holler.
Are they though? I mean,
Of course, I
I
would.
bet it's gonna be covered though. Let me find out, if we have solar panels on the roof and there's damage, if it's covered with our coverage.
Sure, they're,
Yeah,
Removal and reinstall.
exactly. Because they totally fixed it before. There was no cost to the district except for our deductible, which
true.
I don't
I'm
think
just,
there was one on the
just
hail.
referring in relation
So-
to potential solar panels being on top there as well, and I would, if I was an insurance person, I would scream and holler myself.
Yeah, let me look.
But, yep, thank you,
Into it.
appreciate it.
Yep.
I can't see. Oh. Anybody else have any other questions?
So, Aaron, how come Harder is only at 49% offset? What's the difference between Harder and the rest of them?
So ComEd posts what they call a capacity map, which allows you to tell how much available capacity is available in a given geographical region based on existing distribution infrastructure, and that maxes out the available capacity in that location.
So meaning that there are other people doing something similar, it's increasing the capacity? I guess I'm not following.
Potentially, there's a few things that go into that. One could be other solar systems that are being sited in the area, but it more just has to do with the condition of the existing distribution system. If you think, I mean, our electric grid was built out over the last 100 years.
Right.
There are things that are really, really old. And this electric grid wasn't built for a two-way power flow. It was built for a one-way power flow, so, yeah. So that's a good question. We would have liked to have gone bigger with Harder Middle School.
Yeah,
But-
especially because you could use the roof. It's a
Yeah.
shame. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't you think it's a combination of those things that you're saying, so?
My guess is it's more likely the latter. That's more
Okay.
likely based on the existing electrical infrastructure.
Okay.
Just because there hasn't been a whole lot of solar development in Illinois,
Yeah.
in any geographical area. So,
There is at the college, though.
is there?
Yeah.
Community college?
Yeah, right across the way. Yeah. I don't know if that's close enough, though. Is that close enough?
Potentially. It's a pretty, ComEd doesn't even publish, they have the substations and feeder lines, and they don't really publish what that looks like.
Sure.
You just kind of Google search a address, and they say you can put 350 kilowatts there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of all the places, that one would be a place we could get more out of, but.
It was, yeah. I mean, I think 50%, I mean, it's still an impactful project, and I'm still excited about it, but I was somewhat disappointed that we couldn't go a little bit further
Sure,
there. Yeah.
sure.
Now, how long have you guys been in the solar panel business?
So we've been doing solar programs for our customers for probably about the past 10 years or so, I'd say. We weren't a real early adopter, just because we tend to, we recommend it when we think it makes financial sense, right? And in Illinois, it just hasn't made financial sense.
Sure.
But California, New York, Minnesota, of all places, Minnesota, you wouldn't think, but, and New Jersey have been pretty active markets for the last 10 years or so.
So this leads on to my other question.
Okay,
That is, we have a potentially a 25-year contract with you.
yep.
You've experienced with 10. How often have you had to do maintenance within those 10 years of where you're at?
We do scheduled maintenance.
Which is, again, same question.
Yeah, so that somewhat depends on where we're at, but here in Illinois, the scheduled maintenance is relatively straightforward. For ground mount, the most of it is actually just landscaping, cutting the lawn, make sure that it doesn't shade the panels in any way. But we'll, send technicians out once or twice a year. They'll do things like clean the air filters and the inverters, and they'll do system checks, right, and do some system calibrations. Certainly, we've had panels that we've had to replace per, manufacturer warranty is typically 10 years on the product and 25 years production warranty. So that's our problem, that's not your problem, but just, we've had to do some warranty management.
So no major stuff other than things that
No.
hiccups.
I'm gonna jinx me, but
I'm just trying to gauge
Yeah.
how often you're going to be out
Yeah.
here type of thing, changing,
Yeah.
the whole system or what have you. And I know you only have 10 years in your belt, if you will.
yeah.
But I'm just trying to gauge that.
Yeah, I would expect about once or twice a year for scheduled maintenance, and so we will have remote 24/7 access to the system in terms of diagnostics, and so if it looks like we're producing less than we think we should be producing, then we'll send a technician out, because again, you're only buying the power that the system produces, and so it kind of behooves us to stay on top of that, right, and make sure the system continues to.
I'm
Produce.
sure that'll be scheduled.
We'll do scheduled, and if we need to, we'll send a tech out we'll roll a truck if we need to, if the system's not performing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I got.
When you said that there's a $5.1 million savings, what savings of what? What is that?
So that is avoided utility, so that's money that would have gone to ComEd, right?
Okay.
That you're not paying to ComEd anymore.
So that's the difference between the 6.93 and the 5,
Well, yeah, yes, at the end of the day, that's where the savings are coming from. The analysis that goes into that number is relatively extensive, right? So it's actually modeling the annual production for each system based on that geographical location and the amount of sunlight that goes there, that reaches that, and it's based on potential soiling, like so snow buildup in the winter, potentially a little bit of dirt buildup. So it's the amount of energy we expect to produce over the 25 years, right, times the difference in the energy rate.
okay.
Yeah.
And do you know, like in that phase 1, what that expected savings would be?
Yeah, I thought that, I was just
Yeah.
looking at it on the way over. So that's a little under a little under 40%, so it's a little under $2 million is batch one, whatever for
Batch one, okay.
Yep.
So the $5.1 million was based on 25 years of all six buildings being approved, and then if batches are approved, and while we have great relationships with our existing municipalities,
Yeah.
if for some reason one of them doesn't approve or doesn't work out,
Yeah.
the savings would then be adjusted because it's one fewer building, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess maybe just to add on to Pedro's thoughts, because I'm not a very good visual picture person, for the ground systems, I guess, Mark, are there any, I presume you don't have concerns, but were there any concerns you thought about when you saw the pictures? Because you would visualize it much better than me.
Well, just knowing how people are, I mean, the neighborhood I live in, they say they don't want any solar. You can't put any solar on your house, things like that. So I don't know how those neighborhoods are gonna react to that. Maybe everybody will be excited about it, and I think probably if we went to our homeowners association at my neighborhood now, they might think differently of it than they did back when they wrote the covenants. But it's just gonna be interesting to see how these neighborhoods react to having that proposed for their neighborhood. Are they gonna be excited about it? Are they gonna be like, I don't wanna see that? You
Yeah.
know.
How extensive do you think they feel at those buildings?
I'm sorry?
How extensive do you think they feel at those buildings? I mean, they looked fairly large at the high school. I couldn't get quite the feel. For the
Yeah,
elementary.
obviously, the high school's a really large system. At Blackberry, to me, it seemed like the least intrusive, because it's kind of off by itself, and there's really nothing kind of going on in the area. There's not very many houses that overlook it. McDowell, it's kind of more in the neighborhood, part of the neighborhood, so that's, like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see how they feel about that. My understanding is it's a little bit more of a transient area in the neighborhood. It's like a lot of rental property, so people come and go a lot more. So maybe they feel less strongly about it than somebody who's making a 25-year commitment to their home, and they have to look out and see that, so.
What do you feel about the high school? Any concerns about that?
Not really. I mean, the areas that we've proposed are not really usable areas for anything else. So I don't really have a whole lot of concern as long as we stay back far enough that we don't impede traffic, obviously. No, I mean, I think it sends a really good message to the community. I think that it shows that we're trying to be proactive and things like that. So having it out there, visible, I think is exciting.
Now, the one off of Blackberry is off of Anderson Road, is that not correct?
Yeah.
Any concerns about if they end up widening that road?
I don't think
to
so. I
school?
think we're far
We're
enough
okay?
away that, I don't think that'll be an issue.
Again, that's another reason to work with the village,
Yeah,
is to make sure that we plan ahead for that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Because that Anderson Road expansion is projected.
yes.
Yeah.
Do these panels create glares from the sky? And where I'm going with this is the airport close to here,
To harder.
to Harder. You know, the airport just reaching out.
So in that case, you probably will have to do a glare study, but I don't anticipate, so the panels are actually designed to absorb light, right, not to reflect it. And so, like in the Indianapolis airport has solar panels all around it, right? So I would not expect that to be an issue, but it is an item for consideration during that permitting process, I would imagine.
And the other thing is there are humming/noises with these things?
It's a good question. There's a very, very slight humming. It's akin to a whisper, right? So you have to literally be up. The panels themselves don't make any noise whatsoever. The inverters, which will be at the building, do make a slight humming sound.
Are they located in boxed in, what have you, or is it going to potentially hurt the human ear?
No, they'll be in your electrical rooms.
And there's transformers that buzz and stuff in there that don't impact students at this point, so I wouldn't anticipate that this would be any different. It's in an electrical room, kind of out of the way of where the students are. And there's already transformers and things in there buzzing and.
All right. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Next potential update? Always when you get approved or what have you, right? But
The next
I'm
meeting,
thinking
right?
maybe at the end of August, we'll come for approval for batch one. If everything comes through and we can get things, keep them moving. Otherwise, September maybe? What are you thinking, Aaron?
Well, I think we should aim for next month if we
Yeah.
can. I think the one, it's hard to, it's impossible to predict whether or not the state incentives will still be available, but the federal, it'd be hard to recognize the 5% costs associated with the federal tax if we're looking at a September decision. Not impossible, but that's if we can make,
We can do it.
yeah, if we can make a decision on batch one next month, I think that would be a good thing to shoot for.
now you talked about a commitment. Is
Yep.
there a dollar figure commitment is there with that? And if so, what are we looking at?
No, I mean, ideally, we'd be moving forward with the power purchase agreement.
Was there a permitting fee that you mentioned, or is that what you're asking about?
That's all built into the.
That's in the price, too.
Yeah, into the energy
Cost-
rate.
Cost savings?
Yeah, into the energy rate.
But there's an application fee, you said, right?
That's built into the energy rate
Oh,
as well.
that's built
Yeah,
into it, okay.
yeah. So that's the ideal scenario. What another customer has done recently is they've approved it, can't remember exactly the way it was phrased, but subject to modifications by the attorney. And we were comfortable with that because, it just, so that could be something we look to do next month.
And the ROE does not charge any fees to the districts for permitting, so the other permitting are through the other organizations. ComEd?
No, ComEd, that means the interconnection-related costs, which right
Okay.
now, we're just carrying those costs at risk. But,
Right.
there should, I would think we'd be working with the local building inspectors as well for the electrical.
Okay.
For ground mount, if we do end up doing any ground mount, then there's stormwater management permitting requirements that need to be met, so.
High enough to stay out of snow.
No,
All right,
well, we'll see.
No promises.
Julianne, you actually bring up a good point. Yes, the ROE may not charge for permitting, but usually they oversee projects, hence comes the cost. I've seen it in every other project we've done around here. So there is a cost with them eventually, right?
No.
Give you some examples. The softball, baseball thing that was over there. They were trying to charge 30% at that time.
Are you talking about
The architect.
architect's fees?
Was that the architect?
Yeah,
or
the
engineering fees?
architect.
Not the ROE. All right.
Not the ROE,
cool.
yeah.
All right.
30%.
And you've got those kinds of engineering fees built in.
Correct, yep.
Those are built into the power purchase agreement?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, that was ROE. Okay,
So-
my mistake.
yep, good question.
Awesome. All right, thank you for coming.
Thanks again.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
All right, so we'll move on to
Mark, will you?
to Kaneland High
Close that
School
down.
graduation update.
Check.
Thanks.
Yep, again, the
Thank you.
J2 is, again, an update, and action is not required. Over the last year and a half or so, the board has heard and challenged and questioned high school about the Latin honor system versus Val-Sal, and some questions have been proposed and some feedback has been given. And so before any action is going to be taken or needed, Mrs. Oslager and Mr. Raleigh are going to provide an update, answer some questions, and be able to get some feedback that we can take back to school, take back to the high school. That way we can kind of see what the targets are, see what outstanding questions still exist, so that way as we move forward, we have more of those covered when we expect to take action or bring a formal recommendation.
Good.
Yep, so go ahead, Mr. Raleigh.
Perfect. So thank you for letting us be here tonight. Jill Maris sends her apology. She has a previously scheduled conflict, and she wasn't able to be here today. But she has worked with the two of us in reviewing this presentation and kind of catching up to where we were. I believe it was 2 years ago when this initially was brought before the board. So talking about the graduation recognition for our senior class, and this is, no, not working. Do you want to adjust those? So looking at switching over, what we currently have in place is recognition for the valedictorian and salutatorians, and changing that over, transitioning that to a Latin honor system. So it would look at honoring what we currently do is the top 2 students in the class to about the top 10 to 15%. And later on in the presentation, we'll take a look at what some of those breakdowns look like. But that's what we're looking at right now, is that current system honors the top 2 and looking to branch that out. And we'll share for various reasons why of looking to honor that top 10 to 15%. Oh, there we go. So we can look at this from a couple different ways and a couple different timelines. What we are thinking about and what we want to propose tonight is taking this current year, so the incoming graduating class would be the class of 2023, of looking at this, of answering some questions tonight and taking a look at how we want to proceed forward and really PRing this and driving it home with that class of 2024. So it would be the incoming 8th graders. When they come into their freshman year, that class of 2024, they would be the first ones that would be graduating with the Latin honor system. That would take place, like we said, in place of that Val-Sal designation. And this would allow us time to communicate that out to the community, communicate it with staff, certainly with students, but make sure that they have ample time to understand what that system entails and what those designations will be at the end of their time here in Kaneland. These are always fun. Okay, so this just kind of gives a balanced look at what those 2 systems currently have. So that Val-Sal, the valedictorian and salutatorian, looks at the highest student's GPA. So that's a designation, like we said, that goes to our top 2 highest performing students. And when looking at this and taking a look at our district philosophy, our strategic plan, and all of these initiatives that we have in place and that we've had in place to really drive home some of our ideas with personalized learning, with tailoring and educational experience to individual students. Val-Sal doesn't necessarily allow for that. It's heavily dependent on weighted grades. It's heavily dependent on AP classes and AP courses to help boost those GPAs. A couple big takeaways from here. Number one, it is a moving target. Those classes change. Which kids are enrolled in those classes change from year to year. And then that last piece there is that it may inhibit some students from taking classes that they are passionate about, that they see as beneficial for their career path, their college path moving forward. And they're going to have to make some choices of, am I going to work more towards this valedictorian track, or am I going to work more towards my customized path based on what I know about myself, what I want to accomplish, and where I want to go in the future. If we look at that honors, that Latin honor system, we'll break it down, but it's really looking at about that top 10 to 20%. The way we've broken it down with some of the cut scores over the last few graduating classes, it boils down to about that top 15% of students. It is less dependent upon weighted grades, and it really allows students to drive their own path forward. Where I may have in the past been relying upon some heavy STEM classes, some heavy ELA classes, if this allows students that are passionate about the arts, passionate about a balanced approach to some of those STEM classes and ELA classes, it allows them to be recognized for their academic achievements. The Latin honor system in practice, and this is in green are the Kaneland cut scores. So we would come away with a summa cum laude would be the highest honor, and that would be 4.1 or higher. A magna cum laude is with great honor from a 4.0 to a 4.09, and then cum laude would be graduating with honors, and that would be from a 3.9 to a 3.99. A breakdown, if we had this system in place over the last 3 graduating classes, it's anywhere between 40 to 47 students that would be recognized in this with these tiers.
We currently do use a combination. Is that our seniors do actually come up with the summa magna and cum laude already designation? We already use it in our graduation ceremony.
Thank you.
And again, looking at this, it takes into account about that top 15%. In talking with Carrie and Jill, we would probably look at recalibrating some of these GPAs every 3 to 5 years. We'll take a look at the last slide here with some of the things we have coming down the pike in the district as far as standards-based grading and some of those practices that we're going to be looking at in the next few years. We might want to recalibrate that in the next 2 or 3 based on some of those things. But again, it's not necessarily a moving target, but these things, when I come into my high school career, I'm going to know what these sets are, what these set scores are, and I can know that I can set out my path to achieve these when I come in as a freshman. Again, looking at this in practice in some of the last graduating classes, a breakdown of those 3 different tiers. And then doing some research with what comparative districts around us are doing. Right now, if we look at the 8 surrounding districts, there are 4 current school districts that have either the Latin honor system or some version thereof. So Batavia, Huntley, and St. Charles do the Latin honor system. Geneva honors their top 10%, but they don't use that terminology per se. They do a high honors and an honors for their top 10%. In reaching out to the 4 districts that have a current Val-Sal program, I either spoke with or confirmed with DeKalb, Sycamore, and Yorkville, and while they do have Val-Sal, they are currently undergoing these similar conversations for a lot of similar reasons that we've talked here. I wasn't able to get a hold of Central before the board meeting, but those 3, DeKalb, Sycamore, and Yorkville, are currently in discussions with their board to transition away from the valedictorian salutatorian to that latter honor system. Again, that main reason is that it focuses on those 2 top students, and sometimes the difference between those top 2 GPAs are hundredths of a percentage point, and it really deters some students from going after the classes that are suited to their best interests. Logistics so far, and Carrie will be a great resource here to answer any questions that come up, but currently it would be a dual structure. So as that class of 2024 comes in, they would be the first graduating class with that Latin honor system. We would start to phase in a chord system for the current classes, and again, that's dependent upon when we want to roll this out. But we currently acknowledge these students at the end of the school year. So there is, like Carrie was saying, there is acknowledgement through that Latin system, through some of our awards programs at the end of the year, through their graduation program. And we would, again, in that bottom piece, continue to look at those every 3 to 5 years, depending on what that trend data tells us. And then talking with the high school administration of looking at how we want to redefine our Knights of Distinction. Our initial thoughts were, instead of using the Latin honor system terminology, we would roll this into calling our Latin honor system would be our Knights of Distinction. Separately from that, and this is speaking to some of the work that's going to be going on this year, is that we still want to identify students that are putting in their best work, and they may not be at that top 10, 15%, and really honor them with an award for respect, responsibility, and commitment to excellence. Those are core values that we're going to be looking at through this year on how to honor those and how to reward those. But we would have a core value award, and that award will be available to the student body for the 2020-2021 school year. So we would honor those that, like I said, maybe not be that top 10%, but kids that are valued members of the community. They're doing outreach programs. They're doing community service. They're those kids that are really the pillars of our society. And when we think about the pride that comes with graduating from the Kaneland community, this award honors those kids and the hard work that they're putting in throughout their career here. Taking a look at some of the AP courses that we have now, we wanted to make sure that we had a balance of those courses, so we did a little bit of an audit of what we have, and it's fairly balanced right now. We have 9 AP courses in our STEM areas, and we have 10 in the language arts, social studies, and art areas. So again, as I come in, if I'm looking to chart my own path, I do have a variety of different AP classes that allow me into that upper echelon of that Latin honor, of that summa cum laude, but it gives me a balance and allows me to kind of chart my course while I'm here at the high school. And looking at what that looks like in practice over the last few years, you can see back in 2017, about 38 and 37 classes respectively, and that balance fell out a little bit in 2018. But again, last year we had the top 10 students took 42 STEM and 42 AP classes in those other areas, the ELA classes, the art classes, the social studies classes. And that naturally leads us into discussions of class rank. If we are not recognizing the number 1 and number 2 students in the class, where does that fall? Right now, there is no class rank, and I believe it's been in Illinois for the last few years. There is no class rank that comes out on transcripts. For the purpose of scholarships, parents have access to that. It can be calculated in the high school. We just don't report it out. It does not go on transcripts. It does not go on any of the quarterly report cards or semester report cards. That information is accessible to parents. And really, in doing some research, the main purpose of that class rank would be sometimes that it is asked for on college scholarships. And if that is the case, that information is certainly accessible to parents, and the high school can provide that to families. And then what this means going forward, we have a lot of really, really exciting things coming down over the next couple of years in looking at transitioning from traditional grading practices to standards-based grading. That will have some impact on how we report out some of those end-of-the-year awards. When we get into looking at plus and minuses that are associated with traditional grades, those kind of fall out when we get into standards-based grading. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. But really, when we take a look at all of the work that we've done, this will be year 4 of our strategic plan, and all the work that we've put into personalized learning, our district stands by that. It is the philosophy. I can speak coming out of the curriculum office and the ed service department, but I believe it as a belief systematically across the district that we truly believe what is best for our kids is that they have a voice and they have a choice in how they're going to charter their path from kindergarten through their senior year here. And when we open up that recognition for students not to be pigeonholed into 1 or 2 particular types of courses, really, really speaks to all of the work that we've done with personalized learning and speaks to just the opportunities that we provide our students. And when we look at those core values, this allows us to nurture very well-rounded students, well-rounded citizens here in our community. So that is a huge piece. We'll be talking about customized paths in a couple years, but this speaks directly to those customized paths, and have done a lot of work this year with core values. And you may not always hear this from a curriculum director, but those are so important. If we can sit back and even kids that are trying their hardest but might not be at that 4.1, 4.2 GPA, it is incredible to see kids go out and be active members of the community, and that plays a little bit into class selection, to balancing out what I want to do in the classroom versus what I'm going to do in the community, some of the committees and some of the teams I might be a part of. So with that, we are open to any questions.
Patrick, I just want to make sure I heard this right. We are still retaining the Latin terminology. We're not going to go to a different, okay, so
Yes.
I just want to make sure I heard that right, because I wasn't sure if we were changing. I think it's important to keep it.
Yes, the Knights of Distinction is, so basically, right now, it would just oversee the Latin system. So you still have magna cum, but they would all be Knights of Distinction.
I see,
And then
okay.
they would be labeled accordingly based on their GPA.
So the current Knights of Distinction would go away.
The current Knights of Distinction would be morphed into this, so that it actually has that piece. And as we work on the core values and defining those this year, then we can incorporate that into it could be that it merges, we might find that it comes together, but we do want to have that core values separated and defined so that we can then include that, because we think those 3 pieces as part of that reporting system are really important.
Yeah, but like Knights of Distinction, I think you need like an arts class, right? Or like certain things like that's not going to
It
be.
is, yeah, it's a
part of it.
3.0, it's a 3.0, and you need to take an art or a language, and you need to take another class of some, so it
that
is.
will morph.
Yes, that will be the magna cum and sum laude thing, I said out of order,
Yeah.
but, and then ultimately, the core values would then be that focus that we could then put that piece into what it looks like to have respect, responsibility, and commitment to excellence.
That seems a lot cleaner. As long
Yes.
as more than 15% of the class is recognized in some way.
Yes, and I would say that's the goal of the Core
Yeah,
Values Award,
I
and
hear
that's
ya.
the
I think
goal
that's
of that,
important.
is to try and actually have that well-rounded person. And even looking at the AP courses and looking at what we have, we've been able to balance that out. And actually, as you can see from that grouping, sometimes you've got kids that took more AP, our top 10 took more language and arts in one year than they actually took in STEM. And there's that misperception that we've got too many STEM and not enough arts and language, and we've been able to add and balance that out.
How soon does a student know if they've earned Magnum, summa cum?
They would know, depends on who you're talking to. So, if you are a very focused student, you're going to be keeping track the moment you entered or started to actually sign up for your high school courses. We have incoming freshmen that were already asking their counselor what courses and mapping it out so that they could, because she said, I want to be valedictorian. And so she's looking at all those pieces. So that is something that we're not opposed to, that dedication. That's great.
Sure.
But we would like to have a well-rounded individual too, and make sure that by the time whoever it is, as a freshman, things change over the course of time, and you may find your path. So it will kind of go through that process.
You'll know where you're at with the Latin system much more. I mean, there are plenty of kids who knew then
Yes.
before the last semester.
Yeah.
You know, you knew
Yes,
math
you
and
would
kinda
know,
go.
you would basically, kids that keep
Yeah.
track are gonna know.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what we're trying to do over the course of time is actually de-emphasize that point grabbing.
Yeah.
And like, I've got to get these points, and we really want to push it back on the learning, and like, you've learned, so you got to see, it's okay. You
Yeah.
learned, and you actually grew and became a better person because of it, and want to try and push into that method.
Sure, I was just thinking, there's gonna be those
Yep.
students who are.
And they got their
As long as they
calculators
can
ready,
still
no
do
matter
it,
what.
right, they can
Yes.
still do it.
Yep, they
We don't
will.
wanna penalize them either,
No.
right? But yeah, but.
No.
And it speaks a little bit to that SEL component of some of the anxiety that goes into
Yeah,
that.
oh, I
Where
know,
it's
Yes.
easier for me to track my GPA, and I'm, like one of the slides said, I'm competing against myself. I can see where I'm at with those three tiers. I'm not stressing myself out. If I have a 4.101 and you have a 4.103, of constantly wondering where you're at, so that social emotional piece, this seems to lessen it in some of the research that we were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you're chasing a number, not a
Yep.
person.
Yep.
right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, and sometimes that can get pretty competitive
Sure.
and stressful for both of them or the three of them.
Well, and-
Sometimes you end up with that.
Personalizing that competition doesn't seem to make any sense, right? Like, now you're just, you're encouraging that kind of competition as
Right.
opposed to growth.
Yeah, it's going back to that focus of, it's you against you.
Yeah, right.
And you're still competing, whatever that may be, there's still things to get out there, you're gonna find your class rank, you're gonna calculate those numbers, you're gonna do what you wanna do, but we want that focus to be more internal versus, that sense of accomplishment versus like fighting off with another person.
All right. College and career ready. I'll start with that. Keeping that in mind. You guys have come to us, this is the third time. The first time we said no. Keep vowel and sound on there. Second time you came in, we said no. Keep it there. You want to add Latin? Go for it. Because some of the elements you mentioned about the classes and whatever, modify the grading of the classes to whatever the grades were coming in here. That was the direction. Now we're coming at it for the third time. That pisses me off.
Well, I apologize for the language, and I'm sorry that you're upset.
So-
But this is a
so-
long-term goal of what we're looking at for personalization.
So as far as competition outside of these walls, it is so furious.
We're not stopping that. That is
Sure
actually.
you are.
No, you're not.
You're treating this place like a park district. Everybody gets a
No.
trophy.
No, that's actually not the case.
I mean, I think teachers do a fabulous job. They did it with my children.
Good. Glad to hear that.
But there's so much competition that's out there to not have that, even in here, we've had it before. I remember the instance where our previous athletic director came in here, he's like, mine's better than yours. It just right there, right that night, when they were talking about trying to eliminate, again, the ranking, even the rankings as well. So obviously, the administration didn't hear us.
Mr. Rivas, to that point, I need to go back and do some research on the previous meetings where this has been presented, because if the board has voted and has said by majority, do not change it, don't bring it back to us ever again, we wouldn't. You know what I mean? We wouldn't.
Yeah, we were under the impression that that was the
They wouldn't spend the time
case.
putting that together. So to your point of we're not hearing and we're still bringing it back, that's something we will go and research. And if that isn't the case of the notes of previous board meetings when this has been presented, we will finalize that and bring an update.
I don't think we would have told you not to bring it back. But the fact that we gave you, at least in the last one, to go ahead and put in the Latin system in, which apparently they have, but do not eliminate the rankings that go along with it, if you will, the valedictorian, salutatorian. But yet you come back again. So
And my recollection was that we didn't want to take the Val Sal from a class in the high school,
That's currently there.
but there was discussion about what should happen going forward, and maybe I don't remember correctly. So I don't think we wanted it to start, like, we made the Latin system start right away. We didn't want to take Val Sal at the same time and pull it from someone who was sitting currently in the number one spot, you know, in the junior class or something like that. But I don't know if we made a decision.
And that's why we aimed it at that class of 2024, so that would allow.
well, even if you
that
install it,
you
you're still not taking it away from them. They're still going to fall in that
This would be number one.
position. It's just
Right.
more the persons that are going to challenge themselves, which is what the industry is. As far as the GPA is concerned, I mean, I wouldn't have been hired in my company if I didn't get a 3.5 and above.
I certainly can't speak to every industry that is out there. I can speak to some of the research that I've done in preparing, in this being a new role and giving this presentation. There's an extensive list, starting with Harvard and a lot of the Ivy League schools that use that Latin honor system, and they're not using a
I'm
Val
not
Sal
saying
honor.
anything in reference to that.
In looking at some companies, some of the very high-performing, high-functioning companies, Google is one of the best examples of looking at thousands of attributes of all of their employees. That GPA had very, very minimal impact on the productivity and the high-performing employees that are associated with that company. So I certainly respect that, I understand that. When we look at the work over the last couple of years, I think it is making adjustments based on the information that we have available to us. That SEL piece is a huge piece of that. The amount of students that we see that are hospitalized, that are just having emotional breakdowns based on that competitive drive. We're not recommending that we water down anything. We're not recommending that we give a T-ball vanilla approach to our academics. We're just saying that we want to have kids to customize that, to be able to have a say in that, to if I am not the number one student, I can still set my sights very high, and I can work and take very challenging classes, and I can still get that 4.1 or that 4.2, and I can bring that to colleges, and college can see those. But they can also see if I'm at a 3.6, they can see that I have volunteered with the community. They can see that I've worked with our elementary schools, or I've donated my times in other ways. So it's not that we're trying to water anything down, or I think you said the Park District approach of everyone gets a medal. That's certainly not what we want to do. But based on the information that we have and the research that is coming in, this is something that we believe is very beneficial to our students.
Carrie, you mentioned this year, for the first, I think it was the first year this year, based on some of this conversation.
Yes.
Where at graduation, students were recognized in the Latin honor system.
Yes.
As you worked towards that, were there any pros and cons, or what were the pros and or cons that you saw and heard from either staff or parents or students or anybody as they started to have the conversations? Because I'm sure some of that
Right.
feedback has been used as you try to prepare, or as we
Yes.
prepare moving forward.
Yes, so what we heard, and so This year, it initially began even the year before as the recognition and just the conversation of putting it in there, and then this year as well. And so with that is, you have a bigger group of kids. You still have your top, your 1 and your 2 that were acknowledged. You hear a bigger group of kids that are willing and able and actually pushing themselves because they are recognizing that that's something that they want to aim for. They want to have that little star next to their name, or they'd like to have the little cross or whatever it is we do to recognize those pieces. What you hear and what we've heard from parents in regards to conversations with implementing that Latin honor system has also been very positive, because it has been great. My child's also being recognized for the work that they did, even though they're not 1 or 2 and they're not getting a trophy and giving a speech. They're still getting some recognition. They're getting that piece and showing that when they go to college, they're in the top 15%. You know, so if they're looking for those special scholarships, or they're looking for a place that they want to go to that's a highly competitive university or highly competitive, even a trade school, that actually factors into those conversations, what they have in their essays, in their talk with the admissions counselors, all of those pieces. We've not heard any negatives in regards to any of that Latin honor system, and it really has opened up for a lot of kids that ability to be able to experience what it's like to get that recognition for being academically challenging, or actually be academically challenged, yet not being 1 or 2. So it's allowed more kids to get that.
I think another piece, as we look at this more, feedback from the counselors that I think would be important
Yes,
is
we have, yep.
where there's students that maybe didn't get into whatever was their upper echelon school and had to go somewhere else because of the impact of a Latin honors. And I'm not looking for an answer right now, but did it help more of our students? Did it hurt our students? Is there anything quantitative that we can say, because of this, this happened, or due to it, this happened? And just something quantitative for future direction or future
Sure.
updates.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, because
Okay.
I'm sure they would have some examples and stories probably of what they've got
But
from
if
there.
someone was number 1, they
Yeah.
could have put that on their college application.
Absolutely.
If they weren't valedictorian.
Absolutely, yes. Your college application, depending upon where you're going, but for the majority of them, it's not asking whether you're valedictorian or salutatorian. It will ask you class rank, and then it will say however many out of however many.
Yeah, because I did feel like, actually, that those people could have been, I don't know, I would say recognized more, and I say that, and that's almost being too critical, because I have no way to say what that should have been. But I felt like with that class, it didn't start at the beginning for them. So it was like an award to give them, which was great, but I feel like with like my other kids coming through, that's something that they know and is more of an achievement. So maybe it's not even to say that you could have done more, it's maybe me thinking it's just more ingrained in the system.
Yes.
And so maybe that's just,
And I think it's a piece of, because it was an introductory piece, and because it was the directive to introduce, it was introduced. And so now, you know, if it's a piece that's part of ingrained, you're pumping it up. You're kind of talking to your kids from the start about what it means to be in these.
But I don't know if we've ever had a Valsell, we probably have, I would hope, but who's been a 4-year band kid. I don't know if that's mathematically possible. And to me, that's unfortunate.
To
You
do
know.
what, I'm sorry, what was it?
If you're a 4-year band kid. I mean, we've had
Right.
kids be valedictorian that have taken a band class, but if you've done 4 years of band, I think the math doesn't work, and you can't, I don't know that you can be valedictorian, truthfully.
And that's where looking at the overall long-term of
Yeah,
this, and what it looks like is that you could, if you're talking about finding your passion and personalizing where you want to go, that could be an opportunity if we start looking
And
at
it's
how
not
weighted.
because you didn't take all the STEM and AP classes, it's because you had the 4-point band class. I mean,
Yeah.
the math of it just is.
Yeah.
I do get, Pedro, you want there to be competitive, but I do think to be in the top 10 in your class, let's say, is hard too.
Yep.
That top.
Oh, it's not going to be easy.
That top, the 3.
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
Yeah, the 3, it does open it up to some kids who want to do something besides taking study halls instead of band.
And that's exactly what the directive we gave them. They said they're going to take the so-called easy classes and get an A out of it, and it's going to factor into the GPA and such. That was the directive. Didn't fix that, where it won't be so graded, if you will, because they're trying to take the easy way out, if you will, or the easy grade up, if you will. And that's the direction, if I recall, that we gave. But anyway, whatever.
Have you talked to any of the students that passed valedictorians, salutatorians? What are their feelings? Have you talked to them about their feelings about going to this type of a system other than the?
We haven't asked any previous graduates. We've had conversations with current students within our student advisory and just general conversation about what they are looking at and what they're looking for. But we could reach out to see.
Yes, it's an honor. Okay, I understand that. It's an honor to be salutatorian or valedictorian. I understand that. But yet, at the same point in time, how do they feel about it now? I mean,
Right.
was it something that it really led them to be in that situation? Were they forced into that situation?
That could be.
Yes.
You know,
Right, and that, I think that's probably a good piece to look as well, is like if by receiving that honor, what did it do for you? Did it
Right.
actually put you on a path or was it too
Right.
much and you just did it because your mom made you or whatever?
And another thing is, okay, so you were selected to be valedictorian on your thing, and then the person that was right below is the salutatorian. But possibly the salutatorian did a whole lot more things in a different area, and maybe they were in classes that were at a higher level at some point in time
Sure.
than what you were, but you had the grades going up. So did the valedictorian actually feel that they were the valedictorian, or were they just thankful they got it, but did they really feel that they deserved to have it?
I would say for most that they really deserve, they were really, I am hard pressed to see in my 15-plus years of education at high school level, a valedictorian that wasn't driven and didn't know by freshman year that that's kind of what they wanted to head towards.
Right. I understand that, but,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep.
Just how, what is their impression of looking at it from the top down?
Sure.
And I think it is probably motivating for
Yep.
some of them because they've thought about it
Sure.
since freshman year. And I think some of the valedictorians, if you look at like AP scores and those sorts of things, have been off the charts. Like they
Yep.
overall have
Right.
done,
Your kids, your high-achieving kids are going to achieve, and they are
Right.
going to push. What we would like to do is we would like to bring those kids in the middle and help bring them up too.
Right.
We'd like to give them that opportunity to push themselves even further and give that chance to personalize and get up there.
and that's what I've heard is the cut scores matter. Whatever
Yes.
those are, and probably
Right.
recalibrating them
Yep.
matters because the same numbers aren't going to always be right. But it
Correct.
has
No.
to be hard to get to.
Right.
And each of those
Mm-hmm.
distinctions have to be, a challenge. And you've got to look around at that group of people and go, yeah, that's the right group of people, and I don't know, I think I felt like that group for last year probably was about right. I don't know. I don't, just to say the number of each one, that kind of thing. But we still had a Val Sal. I mean, it is a different thing than to get rid of that as well, but I thought that was a good
What
addition.
percentage did the nicer distinction cover?
It ended up with its current parameters about 30%.
And how much does this Latin system cover?
The Latin system is 15, but that's where the core values that we're looking to add that separate piece in there. The current Knights of
Go back down to the 30,
The,
to include the 30.
possibly, yes, I think that's where the
So
core
we're just
values
switching
comes
out,
in.
That's what we're doing.
But it would look at, it's
It looks
looking
at
different
specifics.
parameters.
Because
One
right
would be
now-
Strictly academic, the
Right.
other one would be several other components that go into that core value award.
Right now, what we had heard also was that for Knights of Distinction, it was actually not as robust as what it needed to be. And so part of that was actually, and this was a suggestion by a couple students and then by our curriculum, our staff itself, is what about actually taking that Knights of Distinction and making that what is the umbrella and what we call our Latin honors. And then, since we're working on our core values of respect, responsibility, and commitment to excellence, what can we come up with over this next year that really points that out so that you can recognize those kids that maybe aren't academically high, but they're well-rounded, or they hit these parts, or they hit those core values that are truly what we're looking for.
Like the National Honor Society?
National, yeah, that would be a separate entity too. Yep, that's a separate honor that they get on their own. It's not replacing any of that.
But that's usually really fine-tuned set of students, 40, 50, whatever that is.
Yeah, and what we're looking at for the core values is what we're trying to do is personalize that for Kaneland, whereas National Honor Society is open for the entire country. And what those pieces are, what we would like to have is, we would like those core values to actually represent what's important here for our graduating kids. Like, what is it we want our kids with that graduate profile? How do those pieces, and what does it go out and do for them when they leave us?
And they're still going to have to work for it.
Absolutely.
And still allow NHS and other
Yep.
distinctions, AP
Yep.
honors, those kind of things.
Absolutely, yes.
Illinois State Scholars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to go a little further, NHS, yes, it is a national thing, but there is things that you need to do.
Mhm.
Grade point average being one of those.
Yep.
And what have you. But so as far as being national, yeah, but it's still local. Because that has to apply to that individuals or
Sure.
individuals.
Absolutely.
I think what I would ask the board, since we're not taking action tonight, appreciate the update. Is there any other information, since we still have ValSal, we're still looking at this, we have another strategic plan coming up, I'm sure that this will factor into that at some point, based on the conversation, because that's what will drive us forward after Kaneland 2020 is over. I just don't know if there's any other considerations the board wants this group to look at, the high school group to look at, as we consider this moving forward.
I think it might be useful, maybe you guys even know this point spread between the number 1 to the number 15, right? Is it really hundreds of a point? Because if it is, that might be something also to consider here, right? Because if it's hundreds of a point, that's the difference of one test. That's the difference of a teacher rapport that maybe doesn't jive completely, right? Like, no system is completely objective, so there's a little bit of subjectivity in all of that. So if you just make a bad choice or get a little lucky, if it's hundreds. And now if it's not hundreds, maybe it's different. But if it is hundreds,
I don't think it's that close for that.
is it?
I do have, I have it back in my office. I do have the past couple years printed out what the scores are, so I
Sure.
mean, we could,
It might be worth it. Look.
Yep.
But
If
I
it's
think the
not-
data on that showed that was anywhere from like 4.19 down to 3.99.
Okay, so that's
From number
there's a-
1 to like the last person that was included, number 42 or 43 or somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why is it that we're not applying to the transcript of GPA and class rankings?
GPA is listed on there. Class
ranking.
class rank is not required by the state, much like the SAT scores and things like that, not required by the state, so therefore it doesn't go on the transcript.
That's changed over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
2 to 5 years, yes.
I know one of my sons had to come back and get that because they were in front of the people and they said, well, what is this? And he had to come back to the high school or call in or whatever just to get it, which is a shame. Should have been there.
But it was
Something
available.
the school was looking for. huh?
But it was available to them.
Yeah, but it was there before.
That was my only.
Yeah, okay.
Gotta be looking at that.
And we can definitely see if we can reach out to some previous
Yeah.
ValSal people and see if that was something that they felt
That'd be
was a
interesting,
threat.
yeah.
I would doubt you find any negativism to it. Obviously. It's gonna
And
be a
also if there
positive
was
thing
any
to
other
improve.
drawbacks that counselors have found.
Yep.
Pros or cons, because it'd
Right.
be interesting to learn and know all of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go to J3, discussion and approval of capital projects.
Yep, I'll turn that one over to Dr. Fuchs, and I'll let her walk through that, the memo.
Sure. At the special board meeting on July 9th, I talked to the board about the potential of doing a few more capital projects, given the surplus that we had at the end of the 18-19 school year. Mark Payton is still here, which is helpful, and he and I talked about the 5 projects that did not get approved in January. If you turn the board memo over to the back page, all of the projects that were approved are above the bold line. There were 5 projects below the bold line that did not get approved. We've identified 3 of the 5 that have the potential of either purchasing or installing or getting them done this fiscal year. The other 2 projects would require too much, I don't know what you would call it, disruption to the building during the school year. So they will go back into the list for the potential of the future. in terms of capital projects. The three projects that we've identified is Harder Middle School originally had asked for additional security cameras, primarily in the wings. They don't have any in the wings. They've got them in some major corridors, the cafeteria, things like that, but like down the hallways, they do not. All of the schools have indicated a need to have some flexibility for furniture, for personalized learning classrooms. And so what we're talking about is about a $10,000 allocation. And I do know that Mr. Raleigh and Dr. Mum have worked with the building, so if this is approved tonight, we're ready to place that order within a day or two so that we can get that furniture in. And then lastly, Mr. Puckett at the high school and the band, he had originally a 4-year equipment need. Actually, he had the need. We divided it into 4 years. 1 year we had to wait, and so he's got 3 out of the 4 years done. He's got 1 more year to purchase some large band equipment, and so you'll see that in here, and he too can get that ready to go within the next couple weeks, given his band camp schedule now. And so we're recommending tonight that the board approve these 3 additional projects or capital purchases for this budget year. If they're approved, when I go to do the final budget, they would be included in that final budget. So again, with the financial projections we've been looking at, we do believe that there's room in order to do these 3 projects. In terms of a timeline for future projects, Mr. Payton and I visit with each of the building leadership. We go through a large list of what they see, what we see, what their needs are, what their systems look like. It's pretty thorough. It's a large database that Mr. Payton has developed. We do that each fall, and then from that, we prioritize, and that's the information that we bring to the board, usually November, December. The sooner we can get those projects approved for next summer, the better it is, because then we can get the bids going, and then we can get the contractors committed early. The earlier the better, so that they can order materials and supplies and be ready to go for summer. Anything that you would add?
What are the 2 bathrooms at the high school that need
The
to be
main
done?
foyer, in the main foyer there, the men and the
Okay,
women's
they are
bathrooms.
awful.
I understand that. But I also understand that we don't want to have them torn up during the school year.
Well, I understand that too, but I mean, when I go to games and things like that, and I hear people from other communities that are at those games making comments about how god-awful those 2 bathrooms are.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. So
So,
why are they not being done, why isn't something being done with those things at the end of the school year so that they're ready for the school year?
the high school prioritized the capital projects on the list for their needs. And at this time, they've indicated that the science classrooms were their number 1 priority. From there, if you look at the list, everything else on this list almost is safety. Concrete, door replacements,
I understand that.
yep.
I understand that. But I'm just saying it is awful. Those washrooms are awful. And they
Would it be
do,
Sorry,
go ahead.
no, I don't want to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, would it be possible to do those, like, during winter break?
They're gonna need extensive.
They are gonna need
2
extensive.
weeks is not enough.
And-
That
and-
place is hot
And
anyway.
and to me, that's the whole
Plumbing.
point. They need extensive remodeling.
Okay, I was,
And we're aware of that, and they are on the list, but they
But it
didn't
just
make the
keeps- But
cut.
it just keeps getting put off.
And I could say the same thing about the football field bathrooms. Oh my
That's
God.
another one.
Oh my God.
Yes.
So, here's what I would say is, we can bring a list, like we've got the $5 million out there for capital projects. I will recommend how much money I think we should spend. If the board wants to allocate additional resources beyond that recommendation, you are always welcome to do so, or pick a project that you want to take off something else.
Well,
That's
those-
always the board's
those wa-
prerogative.
I mean, and he's right about the one over at the football stadium too. Those are bad too. Those are really bad.
Yep.
Um,
The reason why we haven't done much with those, is because we bring in the porta potties. And when you have academic classrooms, such as the science classrooms and the other classrooms that we've renovated during the past 2 years,
Yeah.
those classrooms have taken precedence
and I
over
understand-
washrooms.
And I understand that, but when you're talking about a washroom that is open to the public, and you've got people coming in from other districts, it's not a good thing.
I'll relay that information to the high school administration
Thank you.
during our meetings.
Also, I don't think it's fair that, I mean, for instance, just to compare the schools, I mean, the elementary schools don't have much. You come into the middle school, you have a lot more things. You have the tracks, the tennis courts and what have you. The high school, plenty more stuff. If I'm a high school principal, I assume, or staff that you talk to, yeah, I'm gonna go to the inside first before I go to the outside. That's what your options are giving me. I mean, as an example, a couple years ago, we had some extra money. You bought a tractor, right? We do car replacements for driver's ed here and there. Is that a decision made by the high school? Is that something we make a decision outside, a group of other things?
The high school is included in those conversations. Without those driver ed cars, we can't teach our driver's ed classrooms.
I understand that. I'm not necessarily not saying not needing those cars. I'm just saying, I'm sure there was other elements here, and then, yeah, we have to go here. We have to go. I know the tractor situation, I remember we had extra funds, and therefore, great for
Well,
you.
we
You're able to
budget for
replace
a
that.
new tractor each year because we have so many that we have to replace them on occasion.
I didn't understand. I didn't get that at the time that it was allocated for it. But it was
Okay.
we came up with extra funds, we bought a tractor. If I recall, that's how it was. But anyway,
My only concern is that,
Sometimes we delay spending that money in case we have another greater
Understand.
need, and then we spend it, a lot of times we wait to spend that allocated money till towards the end of the budget year. So it's not extra money, but we delay just in case something else comes up and we need to reallocate that money. to
Right.
something
and my
else.
main point with this, I think there should be, especially at the high school, there should be a different grouping than just the high school itself, the building. Because you got so many other things. I mean, you talked about the bus barn needing repairs or needing a new one or something or other. I know that's extensive monies, if you will. And again, just some of the other things we mentioned. I don't think it equates from school to school. To
It
allow-
doesn't.
To have them to make a decision, is where are you gonna spend the money? Of course they're gonna go to the science room.
So it doesn't equate. The elementary schools and Harder Middle School generally have had very few capital projects in the last few years. The majority of the money has gone to the high school because the high school is in the greatest need because it's our oldest building.
It's older.
True.
And so we have allocated that money toward the high school.
well, those two bathrooms have been on the list for a number of years now, so. I mean, it's
And
not
again,
something
we've had to
I
prioritize
know,
some of
I
the
know.
other
I
things.
understand
Yeah.
that, but that thing has been there for, what, 3-4 years at least?
And again, this is the same thing too, as we get into the new budget year. November, December is when we go through FAC and/or CAC, and then we get feedback on the list of items and even FPC, I believe, and we'll bring back recommendations again every December
Right.
based on what we think we need, and then we usually draw a line on what we believe we can budget. And one of the things we're also going to do moving forward is look at, because I know 2 years ago, we had our two architectural firms come in and look at what a long-range facility plan could look like. But due to the expense at the time and due to the fact that we didn't have finances, the board didn't approve it at that time. So we went through two of them, brought them to the board, and the board said, no, thanks right now. So while I don't think a facilities plan might be needed yet, what we do need is a strategic spending plan that Dr. Fuchs and I have talked about, and we've talked about doing it, taking into consideration more than just year to year, as Dr. Fuchs and Mark and Mr. Payton already do, but extending it out over the life as we currently have, and highlight some of those things moving forward that we think maybe we either need to work towards and work on, because Dr. Fuchs and Mark do a good job of laying that out over a period of years.
And we do, the capital plan is a 5-year plan. What the architect and the professionals will do is a little bit longer.
But there probably is a feeling that stuff in the 5-year plan gets
I'm sure there is, because we've
'Cause it
never
does.
been able to
Right.
afford the
to-
entire
yeah,
year
so maybe
at
it is
one
a
time.
more, just.
Longer,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And as needs come up, that's why we meet with the buildings and make sure that we're all on the same page for priorities.
And it might be reevaluating how much is put into capital expenditures. Maybe it's not enough
Right.
from the feeling of,
That is possible. We did run out of referendum money, which was helping us to repair roofs. And that only went so far, and when we ran out, we started allocating current resources toward capital, which we never had to do for a few years.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you're talking about a strategic plan from the administrative side, there's also board philosophy, right? And so like, maybe it's time to address that too. Like, maybe it's time to start thinking about what our philosophy is when fund balancing and how much we should be spending and that kind of stuff too as well when it comes to capital projects.
yeah.
I don't know if that's a new topics thing or. if
And
it's-
I'm, maybe you can obviously suggest it if you want, but, but I wouldn't mind if you suggested it after next week to wait and see, because I'm curious if any of that will come out of our board retreat.
Yeah,
If there'll
that
be
makes
any
sense.
different big picture thinking, and if not,
Sure.
then maybe we need a targeted one.
Yeah, and
But I think those are good things to be thinking about going into next week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe when we have 3 more board members here too.
Bigger group.
All right, so does anyone feel compelled to do these 3 projects, or is there a feeling that this should be tabled and the money should be saved up to do a different project, but it can't be done now likely? Or where are we at with
So
these?
the 150 is to cover which ones? The ones in bold?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, you guys have done your homework. It is what it is. You prioritize it.
Well, and
As far
these
as
are
I'm
the ones you
concerned.
can accomplish, right?
That's correct.
Right.
That's the point.
Right, so,
Feasible.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, so then I'll move that, there's 4 of us, that the Board of Education direct the administration to proceed with the purchase of 3 additional capital expenditures listed in the memo in the estimated amount of $150,000. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a roll call.
Can I have
Oh, sorry,
question?
go
Another
ahead.
additional question
Yep,
before we go?
one more comment?
Yes, so we went here because of the additional monies that we found, right? Yes, no? Correct? So we only selected a certain amount of money to spend here? How did we go with the 150 only?
Sure. The other 2 projects that are on this year's list cannot be done during this fiscal year.
Okay.
They can be done next summer, but not this fiscal year.
Was there also some thinking that that was close to like an O&M, an operations and maintenance savings, or,
I didn't
Yes and
really
no.
look at that.
okay.
Um,
I know Teresa brought up that thought at the last
Right.
meeting. I don't know if, it seemed
Yeah.
parallel at the time, but I don't know if it was
Yeah.
an extensive.
All right, so
I can
if
look
we
at
did, if we, just in case, if we were to include like the bathrooms, it couldn't go in this budget? It would have to be into the following year's budget?
We can put it in this budget, but it needs to be completed by about June
That's
20th.
basically what I was going at.
And I don't know that
I don't know that it's,
No, I
I
mean,
don't
school
think
gets
it's
out towards the end.
feasible.
Not enough time.
Yeah, that's why we do the capital plan in December. Get your board approval as quick as possible so that we can plan for the summer. And then that actually, when those bills come in, it's actually on the following fiscal year.
Right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
basically where my question was going
Yep.
to.
Yeah.
So then
I
we
don't
start
think we
with that.
can.
Okay. All right, cool.
I mean,
All right, understand.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think one of these years.
But let's keep at least those bathrooms. I'm not as concerned about the carpet replacement or the foyer ceiling as I am about those bathrooms.
Those are high on the list.
Understood.
All right, let's do a roll call.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Farber.
Aye, motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to J4, approval of school resource
you.
officer agreement.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Excuse me, as you know, we currently contract with Kane County Sheriff's Office for our school resource officer, and our school resource officer for the past 4 years happened to be Deputy Connolly. And so as the contract expires, what we do is we negotiate with the Assistant State's Attorney and also the current sitting sheriff. So it was previously Sheriff Kramer, now it's Sheriff Hain. And as a result, you'll see the attached recommended contract, and I do have some bulleted points. I do want to share a little bit what's different in this contract than the previous contract, because most of us aren't experts to read those 7 pages and make heads and tails out of all of it. So some of the highlights, the first bullet point is the fact that where it's a high school principal, we've added designee also. Because there are times where it might be the athletic director who needs a certain amount of supervision or workers, or it might be Dean West who needs extra officers on hand. But this way allows flexibility to have other people work with the sheriff's office to work on that. Number two, a financial component to it. Right now, at the $50 an hour rate, as we talked with the sheriff, and thankfully with Sheriff Hain, it's been great to work with him thus far. It was his idea. We didn't even have to negotiate that down. He shared that as part of his campaign last year. One of the things he wanted to do is work with the school districts and reduce that expense and try to put it in other places. So one of the things you see that it's been reduced in half, down to the $25 hour rate, and with part of those savings, the next bullet point, this one is huge in that Dauberman and Kesslinger, there's generally one or two, thankfully not major accidents there, but one or two fender benders at that intersection each year. And Deputy Connolly, as part of her post, is out there most mornings. But with the additional savings of the $34,000, $20,000 of it is going to be moved to have a different officer, a different deputy out there every morning. So the dual benefit is, we know as long as they can hire somebody, because it's an extra detail, wouldn't be part of their position, there would be an extra deputy out there every single morning, and Deputy Connolly, or whoever our current SRO is at the time, would be inside the building. And which is great for, number one, safety reasons, collaboration. Deputy Connolly knows our students best from an SRO perspective. So for her to be in the building before schools, or before school starts at the high school, that would add to the SEL component and collaboration that we're currently working on and building. So if you do the math on those, with the reduction of the expense for the officer and the addition of that extra detail, it's still about $15,000 less than we paid this year. So we're getting a number of benefits for a lower cost, and that to me is a thumbs up 10 times out of 10. The next thing is the mutual indemnification. That's always one that's very important for the school district and for their side to mutual indemnification, and we agreed to that. It's a 3-year contract, kind of runs when the sheriff election takes place, and so that would run through the end of June 2022. And ours is the first step before the sheriff. Sheriff Hain did share on the phone that they do have some council meetings coming up and a county board meeting coming up, that once they hear from us, they will move it forward with our agreed upon contract. Even with the timing, it may be after the start of the school year, but it was contingent upon Deputy Connolly being here to start the school year, and they said they're fine with that. Even though it might go into September or late August after school has started, they would still say that that position detail would start the school year. Would share that the experience was collaborative. There were a few emails back and forth, one 45-minute phone call to talk through it. Maureen reviewed it and shared there's really, other than the financial piece and the additional detail, there was nothing substantive to note other than a few language things. So Maureen has seen it and signed off on it, and just we're appreciative of Sheriff Hain and the Sheriff's Office and how smooth this process went, and looking for the board to approve this 3-year contract as presented. But we'd be happy to entertain questions.
So we have, again, no part in supplying or paying for their retirement portion of things, right? Just a solid, straight out number then?
Yes, this is the straight out number, and the number that we give them, they will manage whether it's to their insurance, whether it's to their pay, that's
it's
on
just a
them to
fund
work
thing,
through,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's theirs.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Then I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education direct the administration to execute the agreement for the school resource officer with King County and the King County Sheriff for a period of 3 years with the terms as presented.
So moved.
In a second,
Second.
then roll call.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to J5, approval of policies from press first reading.
Yes, as you can see, there's 6 of them, and I want to apologize, first of all, the print, the pink, which are the areas that are struck, are hard to read on a few of them, so we will continue to try to make sure that it's as clear as possible, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer those. But what I'll do is I'll walk through the 6 of them. 3 of them, really, there's not much to comment on from the legal perspective, but there's a few that have some feedback, and I'll talk about the pros and cons of that feedback. The first one, the 2110 qualification terms, and that just divides out a few of the duties under the president and under the secretary. It's not a change to any of the duties, it just divides them out and clearly outlines them. And we were fine with those. There wasn't anything in those duties that was different, they just divided them out. The next one, communications to and from the board. There are 2 parts to this one. The first one, I would comment that basically what it's sharing is, are you in compliance? And by compliance, they mean, are there emails set up for board members so that community members can contact board members directly? Because when this law first went into play about 5 years ago, some of the districts had it set up through their superintendent, and the goal wasn't to have the superintendent to view them and then maybe forward some, maybe all of them, not all of them. So the idea legally was that the community have direct contact with board members. And as you know, with your email, you get some of those. So we are in compliance on that piece. The one comment that is in here that is a recommendation, and it's something that the board has a choice over. I'm recommending no on that one, and even after talking with Maureen, she's in the same way. So it's not a compliance, it's an option. And what it says is under number 2, what they're recommending is that if there are questions that come to board members, that the board then answer them like we currently do, because right now part of our communication agreement, if it's district related, I will generally get back to them. If it's board related, President Sparber, she would get back to them, and then we would identify to the board what the questions were and how we responded. But this piece here is saying that if boards would like to, they can take those questions and then put them in each board packet. So if we get a board member question or a community member question, like the recent one we had about middle school football, what they are saying is if a board would like to, and again, the board can do whatever they would like. There are certain things that are the minimal law, but then the board can do what they would like. And in this instance, the idea was to mention or to bring up, if a board would like, they could add to their board packet a section of community member questions and include those pieces in the board packet. So my feeling on that is, as those questions come up, and if we've seen them, there's a number of times where we get those questions, that it may drive a future agenda, not an agenda like having an agenda, but a true board agenda, and/or sometimes with 2 public comments. We do have 2 public comments where if somebody does want to come in and share publicly, they still have the right to do that. So based on that, and based on the amount of time that it takes to put a board packet together and read a board packet and run a board meeting, it's not my recommendation that we include community member questions and board responses in a board packet for a public board meeting.
Those typically end up in the, I'm drawing a blank.
Weekly update?
The weekly update.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We do, and again, if it's a topic that has come up that the people aren't happy with, or they're not accepting the response, they always have the opportunity to come to a public board meeting and share in public comment. So it's not that they can never be heard. They can, and there is a venue in which to do it. I'm just not sure of all the questions that we've received over the years, if a prudent use of time is to put it in a board packet.
A lot of them truly seem to be questions, and I think if people really have a comment, they usually do
Truly,
come to public
truly.
comment.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
They come with
seems
that.
to usually how it works.
And the questions many times are specific to their situation.
Yeah.
Many times they are one-offs, truly, that they need to know something, and they weren't sure exactly where to go, so sometimes they just go straight to the board.
Yeah, I remember, I
president.
live out of district, how can my kid go to your school?
Right.
Right.
It really isn't a broad-based
Right.
comment, yeah.
And if it is something that is the betterment for the district, there were times we would get a question and go, oh, that is a good idea, we should put that on the website, or we'll change our forms, or we would take it into consideration and adjust as we need to. But for the board packet specifically, I'm not recommending that.
If you did one, would you have to do them all?
Yes.
Okay, so then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, because then otherwise it would lack transparency of who determines why and how this one went in and that one didn't.
And that's what
And I would hate to forget one, but we do respond to all of them, either through somebody in the district or through the board president.
Sure.
The next one, again, might take a little bit of dialogue on this one, but it's policy 230, public participation at school board meetings. So as we read through this, and again, on the back, it always says, consult your board attorney, and we have. So I've talked with Maureen about it before we make some of these recommendations. On it, I know the board has had some conversation on 3 minutes. Is 3 minutes enough time? Is there a certain amount of time if there is a certain community topic that is pressing or urgent? What happens when you have 35 different people that want to come in and speak for 3 minutes each? That's now an hour and a half, and it could be lengthy. So my recommendations on this, what it would allow is, again, at the top where you see replace minimum with maximum. So what we would have is board public comment, and again, we have 2 of them. You can come at the first or second one. The recommendation is for, to update this policy where it'll share that it's 30 minutes total for each of the public comments, the first one and then the second one.
So you're talking about the time frame, total time
Yeah,
frame.
I'm sorry,
not-
yeah, 30
not
minutes
per
time
person.
frame for that.
Okay.
But then there's a caveat here in number 3 that I'll share with you also. Then 20 minutes on the topic, and then 3 minutes per person, which is what we've traditionally followed, is the 3 minutes per person, and we don't formally have a timer, but most people know when they're concise, or if they go a few seconds over, President
Okay.
Sparber hasn't said, stop, you're done, right now.
Right.
So is that 20-minute piece supposed to be, if 10 people want to talk about something that's not on the agenda and one person's sitting there, let's say, that has a different comment, that you're,
Right.
that's what the difference between 20 minutes and 30 minutes, you're
Yeah.
supposed to at some point say, is there,
Right,
does
whatever
someone
that-
have a comment on
yes.
another topic to make sure all the topics are heard?
Right, that way
Do you
one
have-
person couldn't, or one topic couldn't take up the 30, or if it's 45 on a topic, 60 total, whichever those might be,
You're trying
is
to
to
hear
make
the
sure that it
different-
balances that one topic wouldn't consume the whole time.
Okay.
But then what 3 allows, by unstriking the part that you can't read, that's pink right now, by unstriking it, it does allow board president latitude to extend that time past 3 minutes, past 20, or past 30, because there might be times where there is a topic or there is community input that is either warranted or needed, where we do have the latitude to do that. And what the policy asks for is for people to let us know in advance so we can take advantage of that and then answer them accordingly.
That sounds good.
And again, we do have 2 public comments, and both of our public comments are flexible in which you can share whatever you'd like to on either one.
Right.
Some board agendas are set up in which either the first or the second is based on, second can be on anything, first one is only on agenda items, and that can become a challenge, because sometimes if you have a 3-hour meeting or 2-hour meeting, not always fair to make somebody wait till the end. So the way the board currently has it, and again, we'll talk about this Monday a little bit, is this the way we want to currently practice it, but based on timeliness, based on flexibility that the board president has and would give latitude on, those are the recommendations for public comment.
I think it's good that, especially because we don't specify that the first public comment is for agenda items, that there is a way to try to get that different topics because you would want to hear that public comment before you voted. So I think it's nice that there is
Yes.
a way to sort of encourage it at some point to see what other topics are out there, and then to still make sure you have time to pay the bills, to get through those essential items of our business, and then to come back to public comment again, especially if it's an item that's not as timely, didn't need to happen that night.
Right.
You know, maybe it's an interesting, I've never thought about it this way, but it's an interesting way to do it.
Well, that's part of the reason by, the other goal to put a maximum is the board does need to conduct other business. You know, and that's great, thank you, but our 30 minutes are up. There is another one at the end coming up if you would like to wait. Then let the board continue to conduct its business before 10 o'clock when you're tired. You're making important decisions that you want to make in a timely manner.
Is it possible, and we can discuss it as well, is use the sign-up sheet, as the first 10 people sign up, there you go.
Some districts do have that, and some districts do require people to submit questions in advance or sign their name up in advance. We don't currently have that as part of our structure. We just have people come in. Because I know even in the past, at the start of board meeting, we would ask people to introduce themselves in the crowd. We don't do that anymore because we do have a sign-in sheet, but because we are all up here, we don't ask them to sign in all the time, so we don't always know who's here. But if the board, again, at the retreat, we can talk more about that, but if the board doesn't want to go the direction of having people submit in advance, you can do that. The drawback of that is sometimes a topic may come up last minute, someone's schedule may change, because sometimes it's, you need to know 48 hours in advance, so that way we can prepare answers or responses from the board to somebody, or to give updates to the board on what they might hear. But by putting that, that would limit anybody who decides at 2 o'clock today they would like to bring a question in or bring a public comment in, so it limits it to. So there's.
And we definitely get people in the midst of the meeting who.
Yes, that shares at the second one that they wouldn't be able to if you do have a time limit in
They've
advance.
heard something that they wanted to comment on, which is good.
So those are the recommendations on that one. Then the next few, or the next ones, are legal updates that we can like or not like, but it's just telling us these are what the laws are and this is how it's changed. So 5/180, 640, and then the last one I will share that as far as student testing and assessment program, part of this in Press Plus One, the comments, it is updating from Park to the Illinois Assessment for Readiness, the IAR, that language. So that's that. And also it says if the board would like to, they can share the information about testing and scores afterwards. And so I put yes on that because we do both of those things in advance. So that captures the 6 press policies that were included for this one for a board update.
Any questions on those?
And again, it's just on first reading, and if there's any other questions, you can always adjust it before it comes back on consent at the next meeting.
Right.
And which by next meeting, I mean August 26th, not the retreat next Monday on the 5th.
Which will give the opportunity for the other board members to highlight any questions they have.
Yep, if there's any questions that they had on any of these, or, yes, for sure.
Got it.
Thank you. What, I'm sorry, we need action.
Yep.
First reading.
Comments? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommended policy changes from press on first reading.
So moved.
Second? I'll second that. And a roll call?
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Farber.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to Superintendent Board reports.
Yep, I have a number of dates and updates that I'll share. As you know, later in the
That
week.
time of year.
We changed the calendar from July to August. August means school, which means students, and things change rapidly. So the first one, as you saw in the weekly update, the new teacher induction process has started. We have over 20, I think it's 25, Mr. Adkins? 24 new teachers that have started the induction process, which will continue all the way up until the start of school and into the school year. So it's an extensive program that goes into the school year for 3 years. Our workshop is at 7 o'clock next Monday. Starting at 7 o'clock, again, it'll be here. We will start an open session here based on what the agenda will entail, and then from here, we'll transition into the conference room for closed session to be able to be in a smaller, more intimate environment for just the board team. Over the next week, Cabinet and the Ad Team Retreat will take place. As you know, we have 2 of those each summer, one at the beginning of summer and one at the end. One is to kind of plan some of the duties and activities to get started with, and the other one is actually the nuts and bolts of a school year starting, and this is what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. We do have a foundation meeting on the 13th of August. Part of our board retreat we'll talk about foundation, who attends, those kinds of things. But my recommendation is for now, as long as President Sparber is okay with the recommendation, since Shauna attended last year, just to continue with that first one if you're available on August 13th. Okay? I'll send you the date and the agenda, and if you're fine, if not, then we'll just find another board member who's available. August 12th, on Monday, staff shows back up, and we have our staff in service. We've changed it a little bit this year to have the personalized learning component right at the very beginning. So we'll have everybody in the auditorium, and then from there, we'll get started. August 14th, we have students. August 17th is Elburn Days, again, on that Saturday. Mrs. Eggleston has done a wonderful job working with the Lions to expand the opportunity for our students with special needs and IEPs to have a morning session. It won't be Friday like it's been in the past. It'll be Saturday morning, to have opportunity to go on the rides and experience without some of the noise. Some of our students with special needs don't do well with lights and sounds and extra stimulus. So this has been a great, it's about 4 years now, I think. 4 years. Great opportunity for our students and their families. August 25th is the Taste of Kaneland. More information is coming out about that also, which is on Sunday, August 25th from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock. That's one of our culminating activities as we start year 4 of the Kaneland 2020 strategic plan. Those are all the ones that I had. And again, I just encourage you to look on the district website and each of the respective schools' websites for more upcoming events. If you want to attend meetings, or if you are going to attend, please let me know, and I'm happy to try to give you more information as needed.
Anything for you?
No, thank you.
Anything from the board? No. Nope, so we'll move on to topics for future agendas.
We're gonna wait, right?
We'll wait. We'll wait. Public comments, we'll say no. Tonight, we have executive session. Board of Education is scheduled for executive session where there'll be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. So tonight, we're going into executive session for the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed January through June 2018 under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 2.06, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, as well as the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
That's fine.
I think that's it.
Yep. However, you don't need it.
All right. Is there a motion to go into executive session for those reasons?
So moved.
And second? I'll second that, and a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mr. Carey's not here. Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
And Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Motion, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Send text Ryan.
Sure.
Like, what was